to ensuring academic integrity for faculty.
I'm Carolyn Brown. I'm the Assistant Director of the Academic Resource Center at Webster.
And I'm Holly Hubenschmidt. I'm a department head and one of your librarians.
So first we're going to talk a little bit about understanding plagiarism. Plagiarism results when students use source materials in inappropriate ways, whether it's a lack of citation or a lack of quotation marks with or without citation, a lack of paraphrasing, again with or without citation, and self-plagiarism, which is reusing one's work for one class and then submitting it again for another class.
Technically, Turnitin does not tell you if a paper's been plagiarized, but it does show you what parts of a paper it can match to another source on the internet, in databases, and such. So it's going to point out in a paper that's been submitted what portion of it should have a citation. This is helpful for the faculty member to quickly identify problems. It's also helpful for the student to identify their own problems and be given a chance to correct the issue before turning in a final draft of the paper. So a little bit about Turnitin, more about Turnitin. Matches are based on identical words and phrases, and it does not identify citation or lack thereof. And it rarely identifies paraphrases, so it focuses more on direct quotes and words taken exactly from another source. But because of these restrictions, it's vital to assess Turnitin and student work carefully. So there are some misconceptions about this software product, Turnitin. One is that there's a certain percentage of matching that's appropriate, and this is not really true. Some instructors might say that your score should be under 20% as far as matches found, that percentage of the paper, but it really depends on the discipline. It depends on the assignment. Some papers will have more cited work in them, more research that's quoted or paraphrased, and some should be more synthesized and the student's voice. So there really is no standard. A paper with a score as little as 5% could still have significant plagiarism. So it's really important to know how to read a Turnitin report. One of the things that Turnitin will count in its percentage is a works cited or a reference page. So every source used there is usually identified. So that doesn't really count as part of what the plagiarized material is. So you really have to know how to look at a report and read it. And Holly's right. You could have a paper that has 15% plagiarism, but there is actual plagiarism in it, and you could have a paper that has 25% plagiarism that's over the threshold, but actually isn't really plagiarized. So instructors need to have other ways of identifying plagiarism to use with Turnitin. So you'll want to be looking at the student's phrasing, vocabulary, and voice. You know what your students are capable of in general, and you know what their voice sounds like. So if anything is askew there, that would be a red flag for you. Is the material written at a level beyond the student's capabilities? If it's written with such expertise that it really couldn't be possible that the student has this kind of knowledge, that would be another red flag that it could be copied. And finally, does the material sound choppy or grammatically awkward? It may be poorly paraphrased, and it may even be cut and pasted from another source. So if it is plagiarism, you need to start looking at a few aspects of the paper. How many times does serious issues occur? Is this a regular thing? Is this one small example where perhaps the student just got disorganized and didn't cite properly? Are citations attempted? Are they trying, but they're just not knowledgeable about citation, or perhaps as knowledgeable as we would hope they would be at the college level, but some students just have not had that much exposure to citation. Did you really clearly provide resources at the start of the class, and especially define your expectations? If you're telling the students that you expect citation, that you expect to see all of this proper academic work treated with respect, they're a lot more likely to try to comply with that. How would you describe the students' prior activity with you in the coursework? Has everything been going along fine, but they might be having some problems outside of class that you think there's some stress involved, and maybe they made a bad choice here? Or do you think just basic re-education can resolve the issue? Is it a lack of knowledge and the student really wants to do well, and if it was explained to them, they could pull this off?
Right, and there's a big difference between plagiarizing sections of a paper and not citing a source properly. So if the student needs to learn how to cite sources properly, there are other places on campus where the student can get help, and that brings us to the next slide, which is the fact that we really encourage instructors to collaborate with various university resources. So the Plagiarism Prevention Program, or the PPP, which is in the middle, is a program that you certainly can send students to remediate them so that they can learn about how to cite properly and how to write academic papers properly. But if it's just a minor mistake, and you think that the student can work to overcome this, we hope that you would look at there's the Academic Integrity at Webster website for your use, the Writing Center on the home campus. If you're not at the home campus, the Online Writing Center, the Webster Library. Any of the librarians will be happy to help with research and citation and provide students with resources on how to cite properly. And then finally, the ESL program when appropriate.
So worst case scenario, this might happen, and it might happen in your class. The instructor then can report the incident through the academic dishonesty report available in World Classroom.
Correct, and I want to also be clear that this is different than a starfish flag. So we also encourage you to use starfish to make a flag of academic integrity, and that flag will come directly to me, and then I will know that there is an instance of plagiarism, and I will contact the instructor or the site director or the advisor directly myself. But the academic dishonesty report is also important because this gives my office documentation that an incident has occurred. So in case we would need this for any other reason, if it were to happen again, for example, we would have prior documentation. And this is confidential and does not leave my office.
So you definitely, if you run into this, as Carolyn said, flag in Starfish, academic dishonesty report in World Classroom, and then provide the documentation, explain what's going on, and the PPP administrators, Carolyn, will work with you to assess the issue and what options there are.
So before we talk more about the PPP, let's talk about in-course consequences. So a student has plagiarized, and you have some in-course consequences at your disposal, and you also have some out-of-course consequences. So for the in-course consequences, the student can receive a reduced grade or partial credit on the assignment in question. You can require the student to redo the assignment, either that particular assignment or a paper on another topic. You can issue the student a failing grade for the assignment, and you can also issue the student a failing grade for the course.
So outside of the classroom, you actually involve the Plagiarism Prevention Program. And this program really does seek to remediate both graduate and undergraduate students in lieu of dismissal. We really want to approach this that most students, most of the time when plagiarism happens, it's not coming from an evil place where we need to just cut the student loose right away. We want to attempt to educate them and hope that they adopt that and do better. So part of the program is a free, non-credit online course that's available to students with your referral. No violation appears on the student's transcript, and this course does not appear on their transcript. But it's a self-directed learning module with assignments and that receive intensive feedback from the PPP administrators that will really help the student more deeply understand citation, what is plagiarism, how to properly paraphrase, cite, all of that, so that, you know, as an educational institute, we can educate that student and help them to succeed going forward.
So the enrollment process is rather easy. Once the instructor decides that he or she wants to put the student into the PPP, I am contacted, and then I will evaluate the materials given to me. I will evaluate, it could be the original paper, it could be the original paper and a Turnitin document, it could be the original paper and the original source where the paper came from. So I will evaluate those sources, and then I will place an academic hold on the student's account so that the student will not be able to take any other classes at the university until the PPP is completed. And that is not meant as a punishment, but rather we want the student to focus on getting through the program and learning what he or she needs to learn so that they can come back to their academic studies and succeed. Then the advisor is notified, and then we notify the student that they are indeed have been placed in the PPP, and then we add them to the PPP online course, and then they can begin right away.
And this PPP course was really designed by a group of people across campus with some very strong student objectives, really so that the student can define and identify plagiarism, describe how plagiarism interferes with the process of learning. The student will be able to identify steps related to the writing process, so how to go about it if they have not written serious college-level papers before, and to identify and implement practices so that they can ensure that they're complying with the academic integrity going forward.
So the PPP looks like this. Students work sequentially through quizzes and assignments, and they learn about in-text citation, going to referencing, going to quotations and paraphrasing, and then moving on to an annotated bibliography and culminating with the research paper that incorporates the sources from the annotated bibliography and talks about what academic integrity is. And they also, in this paper, reflect on what brought them to the PPP in the first place, what the incident was, and how they could avoid that next time.
So, bottom line, our ultimate reminders and recommendations. You want to use Turnitin to help identify issues. And that's something that you turn on in World Classroom if you do have questions about how to create a Turnitin assignment with a click of a button within the assignment that you've created in World Classroom. Reach out to us. You want to take that percentage that Turnitin gives you with a little bit of caution and evaluate each match carefully. You want to just use some good practices that help prevent plagiarism, like change your assignments frequently. If you've been offering or asking students to write a paper on the same topic term after term for several years, those papers start to float around and bad things can happen. Develop very specific requirements for your assignments. Every requirement that you place makes it a little bit harder for a student to buy a paper or chop up some pieces and create something that isn't original. Check the student progress. Any scaffolding you can do of your assignment is really going to help. It makes it so much more work to plagiarize when you have to turn in some sources, an annotated bibliography, an abstract, a first draft. That really helps cut down on plagiarism.
It does, Holly, because students often plagiarize because they're panicked. They wait to the last minute to do an assignment, to do a paper, or they are just stuck and they don't know what to write. And so that panic sets in, and that's when they make poor decisions and mistakes. So if you've built in proposals and drafts into your course, then they will be taking the paper process in increments, and it will be easier on them to develop their work, and they'll be much less likely to plagiarize because, in part, they'll be forced to start earlier than they would if they waited till the last minute.
So in addition to making best use of Turnitin and thinking about your assignments, keeping them fresh, keeping them scaffolded, there's some really important steps you need to take related to your syllabus. Have a citation policy in your syllabus. State what citation style you want those students to use and what your expectations are.
So for a detailed statement, you can look at the FDC website on best practices to prevent plagiarism, and this is the statement right here, and I highly recommend that you put this into your syllabus, both so that students can see this and also so that if a student does plagiarize and comes back to you and said, well, I had no idea, it is in your syllabus and that is considered a written contract, so that you've made your expectations clear about academic integrity.
And I've heard Carolyn talk before and talk about just the importance of that first night of class. Have the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the syllabus, but it doesn't hurt to go over it just a little bit more. That's about right. Those expectations.
We just can't assume that students know what academic integrity and plagiarism is. They may have discussed it before, but it's important to bring it up in your class during the time that you share with your students.
Finally, we also would like you to model some best practices. If you post a reading in World Classroom, if you've scanned an article or a book chapter that you want the students to read, or if you're going to hand it out in class, make sure that you put the citation on that first page or add a cover sheet with the full citation on it. When you incorporate images into a presentation you might do, whether it's a PowerPoint or Adobe Spark or a Prezi, be sure that you're citing any images that you include. If the students see you giving attribution, they're going to understand that you have these high expectations and high standards for yourself, and we believe they're going to try to rise to that level.
So if you do find an assignment with questionable matches or you do have any concerns about student work, please contact us. That's why we're here. We're happy to answer any questions. If you're not sure, if something looks like it may have been plagiarized, please call us. That's what we do, and we will be more than happy to guide you through that process. And we're also available to talk through any issues you may find and help you assess the assignment in question.
This has been a lot of information. If you want to talk it through any of it with us, you will find us in the Webster directory, and we're happy to help you help your students and just raise the expectations across campus. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.